Court of Revision for the third concession municipal drain. The Court of Revision for the Bishopsgate municipal drain will begin following the adjournment of this meeting. So with that, attendance has been taken, and I will proceed with the election of chair. Do I have any nominations? Councillor Coleman.
I'll nominate Councillor Garneau.
Councillor Garneau, do you accept?
I will.
Seconder? Councillor Pierce. And can I have a motion to elect Councillor Garneau as the chair and nominations for the role of chair be closed? All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Should be super easy because we just got this all day. All right. Could I ask for a motion to approve the agenda, please? All right, Councillor Miller, the seconder. Councillor McAlpine. Are there any changes to the agenda? All right, seeing none, all those in favor? And that carries. We'll ask now if we have any declarations of pecuniary interest for this file. All right. Seeing none, we don't have any written appeals submitted, but if it's agreeable to the court, we'll ask whether there's anyone here who has not submitted something in writing but wishes to address us. So this is for the third concession municipal drain. We're going to do Bishopsgate next. So I'll ask a second time, anyone for the third concession municipal drain? A third and final time. All right. As said, there are no appeals. We have no communications. I'm not aware of any notice or response needed. We will adjourn the court. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Court of Revision on September 3rd for the Bishopsgate municipal drain. Attendance has been taken, and I will proceed with the election of chair. Do I have any nominations? Councillor Coleman.
Councillor Garneau.
Councillor Garneau, do you accept?
Yes.
Seconder? Councillor Pierce, or Councillor McAlpine, sorry. And can I have all those in favor of Councillor Garneau being elected chair and that the nominations for the role of chair be closed? Carried. Councillor Garneau, if you come back up. Okay, so we're going to proceed next with the Bishopsgate municipal drains. Could I have a motion to approve the agenda, please? Councillor Miller, Councillor Pierce, are there any changes to the agenda? All right, seeing none, all those in favor? And that carries. I'll ask if there's any declarations of pecuniary interest from members of the court. All right, seeing none, we shall proceed. We do have a number of written appeals, but before we proceed with those, I would ask if there's anyone here who has not submitted something in writing but wishes to make an appeal verbally. Yes, could I have your name, please, sir? David Lansborough. All right, and your address, please. All right, so we'll proceed. Sorry, is there anyone else who has not made a written submission but wishes to address us? All right, seeing none, we're going to proceed with, and sorry, there are no communications, so we'll proceed with the 5 written requests to the court, and then we'll hear yours, Mr. Lansborough. So how this will work is our appellant will be invited up to address the court. There'll be an opportunity for members to ask questions. We'll have the engineer come up and respond to what's raised in the appeal. There'll be another chance for questions from the court. And then our appellant will be allowed to make closing remarks. I think we'll hear all of the appeals, and then the court will recess. We'll move to the side room to deliberate, and when we reconvene, we'll read the decisions. If there's no questions about process, we will begin with 7.1. This is 2857518 Ontario Limited, 336 Bishopsgate Road. Mr. Wilson, please.
I'm Scott Wilson. I'm representing 336 Bishopgate Road. I'm actually the owner. I have to apologize. We actually had an engineer that was going to attend for us, but they're sick today, so I did forward his notes to the court this morning, and I'm just going to bring up the key points. I can't speak to the technical side of it, but our concerns. So our first concern is on branch A of the drain that's being installed, and it comes to the cost allocation. Just looking by acreage and the different properties that are going to be flowing into branch A, we're a smaller property and we're downstream on branch A, and our cost per acre is higher, which didn't make sense to us. Us being a 5-acre piece downstream, 6, 8-acre parcels of land further upstream on branch A have a lower cost per acre when you look at the costing that was allocated in the report from Burnside. So first off is understanding, and not obviously feeling that that's a fair assumption on branch A and the cost allocation to us. The other part of branch A costing is our parcel of land has to, there's 2 parcels of land that have to put in branch C because our properties are sitting too low that we can't flow into branch A. So we are getting assessed a cost to branch A, but we're getting assessed the full cost of branch C, which my understanding is we retain our 100-year storm on our property. After that, our water then flows into branch C. So our use of branch A will be, if nothing, next to a lot less than the other properties that are involved in branch A. Once again, our cost per acre being higher, assessed higher, just didn't make sense to us, and we didn't feel that was a fair assessment on that. The next part was on branch C, the cost allocation of that. There's 2 properties involved. It was equally split, and one property is 60% larger than the other property. How can that assessment be equal on that? Being that one property is going to have more water volume, and it is upstream from our property as well, which would use more of that branch. Didn't make sense to us again, and we just didn't feel that was a fair allocation of cost to us on there. The last key point that we had is for branch A is the allocation that the west side of Bishopsgate Road. It was told to us in the report that they have allowed for when eventually the west side of Bishopsgate Road gets developed, that it has been designed to take the flow into branch A. We don't feel that it has been allocated enough for the size of the property. Our engineer looked at it, and on a quick estimation, he feels it's around 26% of the flow into branch A. That was just based on some very preliminary numbers that were provided back in the April meeting, but they weren't provided, or that flow wasn't provided in this report on the final one. So we feel that that's hasn't been allocated. It's also supposedly, we understand, going to be in the new official plan designated residential. So we know that that's going to be developed, and the cost allocation we didn't feel had been fair. And then also, if in the future we end up paying for branch A, is there a way that we can recoup those costs back in a cost share to the people that did pay for it? We didn't feel that had been really looked at and allocated properly on it. There was notes from our engineers that I did submit to the court in more detail on a lot of this stuff, but that's really the general concerns we have, is just the percentages, and in simplistic math to us by acreage and the amount of usage of certain branches, we didn't feel it was a fair calculation as to our costs.
Thank you. We'll just hold for a moment. Are there any members of the court that wish to ask questions? All right, seeing none, we'll have the engineer come up to respond.
When we did the assessment for this section of the drain, we break assessments down into benefit and outlet. And that's in section Appendix C of our drainage report for works on Branch A. And benefit assessment for Mr. Wilson's property, as well as for B&B Ladco property and for Odd Trucking, is $43,395. So they're being assessed the same for benefit, which means they're in the same area location on the drain, and they're being looked at the same way. The difference is, again, as Mr. Wilson pointed out, the size of their property, and that we assess as outlet. So again, on Appendix C, the property that Mr. Wilson's talking about is assessed $9,359 as outlet on 2.2 hectares of land. That is roughly $4,600 per hectare. And if we look at the other properties around it, as you go upstream, farther away from the outlet, those assessments for outlet get higher. And as you go downstream, closer to the outlet, those assessments get lower. So we feel that that property has been assessed properly in relation to where it is within the municipal drain. The second point that Mr. Wilson talked about, I believe, was the area west of Bishopsgate Road. That area is roughly 34 hectares. It is not within the watershed of the Bishopsgate Road drain. But we were asked during the design to take a look at that and make allowances for it in the future if it was ever connected to this drain. So we took a look at what it would take to upsize the bottom end of the Bishopsgate Road, so that section that goes from Bishopsgate Road east to the outlet, what that would take to upsize that portion of the drain to allow for the section west of Bishopsgate Road to be drained into it in the future, if that's the case. And we've assessed $125,000 for that increased sizing to the county branch at this point for future connection of those properties. So we feel that it has been looked at and it's been assessed, and it's the costs are part of this, but it's not within the watershed of the drain as we talk about today. Right. So the other question that Mr. Wilson brought forward was Branch C. So Branch C was requested by, I believe, by Mr. Wilson's engineer that's working on the development of their property, them and B&B Ladco properties. And Branch C helps them better develop their properties. As Mr. Wilson said, they'd have to raise their property up in order to use Branch A efficiently. So the request was to put an outlet drain in to drain their stormwater management ponds, two of those properties, and that is only the water coming out of the stormwater management ponds below the 100-year flow in order so that they can better develop their properties. So that's why we looked at them as evenly, took the cost of doing Branch C and divided between those two properties as a special benefit. So it doesn't include anybody else, doesn't include upstream owners or downstream owners. It is just those two properties that benefit from that Branch C. I believe that's all.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the court? Councillor Miller?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to the engineers. Okay, yeah, I appreciate those answers, because every think almost all the written appeals always mention the west side of the Bishopsgate. But what's being done is we're just asking it to be oversized if it's ever hooked up. But all that cost is being costed to the county. There's no cost to them at this point in time, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Further questions from committee or the court, sorry? Just a moment. Mr. Wilson, we'll have you back up in a minute. Yes. All right. So we'll thank our engineers. And Mr. Wilson, you have the opportunity to offer some closing remarks.
Just for clarity, you had mentioned that Odd Trucking was my neighbor, and that was done in the study. Okay, because there's a property that is in between us, that if they were included in the study or not, which wasn't Odd Trucking. So
It's in the general area of your property.
okay, you just stated that our neighbors on each side were Odd Trucking, and there's another 5-acre parcel between us that I just want to make sure that it was considered in the calculation of it as well. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. So we will proceed with our second appeal. This is 1000399788 Ontario Limited. Don and Karen Spearenberg, 1282, 1284 Colburn Street West. Are the Spearenbergs here or a representative on their behalf? All right. Oh, Councillor Coleman.
Madam Chair, if you I believe it was on their submission, they could probably be late today because they were at a something in Toronto for an appointment. So let's hopefully they show up. Second thing I have is, could we leave that map up there? And can those at the podium have a marker or whatever those little red dots are, so they can point out their property and know, so everybody can see what's going on? It helps.
All right, so allow us a moment here to get some technical things sorted out. Yeah, so with the court's indulgence, we'll hold 7.2 that if by the time we've heard everyone else, we'll return to that one, which will take us then to 7.3. This is Odd Trucking, 336 Bishopsgate Road, Nathan Odd. And I believe he's online.
Can you hear us, Nathan? I think you're on mute, Nathan.
Can you hear me now?
If you could speak a little bit louder, then we can hear you.
Okay. My reference was just in reference to the west side, the same as what Scott Wilson had mentioned, in reference to the west side of Bishopsgate, what was going to happen when that did get developed.
Did you have further comments, Mr. Odd?
No, it was just regarding the west side.
Thank you. So with regards to the west side, members of the court, do you have questions for Mr. Odd? All right, seeing none, I'll ask the engineer if he wishes to respond.
Thank you through the chair. Our response would be similar to the response for Appeal 7.1. Area from the west side is being accounted for in an assessment to the County of Brant for an upsizing of the bottom end of Section A of the drain from Bishopsgate Road to the outlet, and for future considerations if that is ever developed. Right now, it can't get there. It's not in the watershed, but if it was ever to be developed, this would be the natural outlet for it.
Thank you. Are there questions for the engineer? All right, seeing none, Mr. Odd, did you wish to address the court one final time?
No, thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, so we will proceed then with number 7.4. This is B&B Land Co. 338 Bishopsgate Road. And if you could just introduce yourself as well, please, sir. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Paul McKegg from Paul Sand Construction. I'm acting as an agent for B&B Land Co. Certainly, thank you through you, Madam Chair. We've talked about some of these concerns already in the previous appeals. Certainly, the west side of Bishopsgate Road and the future considerations for that. The second part is the Branch A versus Branch C. The Branch C is certainly a significant cost for this parcel of land, and the benefit of Branch A for this for our lands is questionable. So, one other question I have, which maybe the consultant can answer, is what on the final design, is it 100% sure that we need to have Branch C? Are there other methods around it? What if it determined later on that it's not required? That'd be a question that I would have. So, and then as far as the proportionate land values, I understand your response before. It's in the similar lines, but thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions for the agent? All right, seeing none, we'll ask the engineer to respond.
Thank you, and through the chair. Similar response to what we've had before about the assessment of this particular lot under Branch A. And I should just point out, Branch A is the design of the flows over and above a 100-year storm and below the 200-year storm. Everything else up to the 100-year storm is contained on the lots and held on by the lots. So Branch A has to be there for these properties, even though they have asked for Branch C. Branch C gives them a better way to develop their own properties. As I talked about, they would have to build their properties up a lot higher in order to efficiently get their stormwater out into Branch A. So Branch C was an option to give them a better way of developing their properties without having to build them up. So, so that was what was requested of us, and that's what we did.
Thank you. Are there questions for the engineers? All right, seeing none, wanted to make final comments?
Okay, understanding that that's been what's requested. So I guess at the end of the day, though, still, what if it is determined later on that Branch C is not required? The timing.
Thank you.
Through you, through the chair, we are at the quarter revision. The actual report has been already adopted and read twice by council. So we are here now just looking at the costs of that and seeing how they can be reapportioned amongst the owners within the watershed. So there is no option at this point to remove branch A or branch C, I'm sorry, and come up with a different option.
Thank you. All right, and then we will proceed with 7.5. This is Paul Sand Construction, 358, 356 Bishopsgate Road. And just before we proceed on this one, the drainage superintendent has advised that these properties are not currently assessed, if I understand correctly. So this is more for information. Did I get that correct?
Yeah, after a closer review, it looks as though the two properties, I believe they are 358 and 356, while they will be in the watershed currently, as the report is printed, those properties, the severances were not assessed into this project. They still reside with the Spearenburg property. So there's no right to appeal.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so that then takes us to our appeal filed orally, and I'm advised that we do need a resolution from the court to hear that verbal appeal. So Councillor Coleman, Councillor Pierce, all those in favor of hearing the oral appeal? Thank you. So we'll call on Mr. Lansborough, and then we'll return to 7.2 in case those folks are able to attend.
Thank you for hearing from me today. Couple comments and questions. Our property, our official name is 2365626 Ontario Inc., which is Triggers and Bows and Lansborough Auctions, 340 Bishopsgate Road. It has been determined through meetings with Burnside Engineering that there is no necessary construction on our property, that it is good the way it is. Through the 3 different spreadsheets that have been for the costing, it's moved around from 37,000 to the last one I saw was 20,000, and now we're at $50,000 in shared costs. I'd like to know the details on that, how it's changed, how we've had 3 different numbers, especially when there's no construction on our property. Secondly, I don't think the consideration for our land being the catch basin for the properties to the north of our property, in the event of an overflow, if I'm correct in saying, from a 100-year storm, it's going to overflow into our stormwater management pond. I don't think that the proper value has been placed on that acreage. I don't think that we've been given proper consideration to the value that that pond now represents in the plan. Again, there's no details on what it is really valued at. And I think that pretty much covers it, is more in the details of the costing. And I would like to see it dramatically reduced for us, since there is no actual construction on our property, that our property is deemed to be in good standing for, I believe, all of the storms. Is that correct? Like, you wouldn't have to do anything to change it for the once in 250-year storm either? Then I think that there should be consideration, a tremendous amount of consideration given to the charges put forth against our property at this time.
Okay. Thank you. Are there questions from members of the court? Councillor Miller?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through to Mr. Lansborough. Can you be a little more clear? Excuse me, on the amounts, you've seen 3 different numbers over time?
The first initial spreadsheet showed that we would be, after credits and assessments, $37,000. The last meeting that we were here, that was an even $20,000. And then on this package, it says $50,141, unless I'm looking at something wrong, assessments for construction.
Okay, and the reason I'm asking is because we don't know that, right? We don't know that. The only thing we see is that final numbers.
Yeah.
Okay.
So 3 times it's changed without any accounting, or certainly nothing's been shared with us as to what's changed, and it appears that nothing is changing with our property. as well as I hope that everyone understands that all the properties to the north, there is no ditch between Roswell Concrete and our driveway. So that means our stormwater management pond is the catch basin for our property, plus at least 4 other pieces of property. And there's been I don't think there's been the proper monetary allowance for that use of our land. And at the last meeting, I also brought up about liabilities, shared liability if that floods, if it overflows and the ditch doesn't get away fast enough and that water does come up onto our parking lot, does find its way to our building, at that point, whose insurance is going to cover that? It's obviously not all the water from our property at that point.
Just given the year that we had earlier in the summer, was there any drainage issues?
You can't make a puddle on our property. There's no water in the bottom of that pond. I do agree that with the plan, it makes sense to use it. I'm not really disputing that, and I'm not, please don't misunderstand that I'm standing here saying you can't use it. I'm happy to be part of the solution. It's very fortunate for all of us, especially us. I'm just not happy to contribute this much. I think that there should be a greater consideration given for the portion of the solution it provides, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Further questions from the court? All right, seeing none, we'll ask the engineer to respond.
So through you, the chair, the numbers that David is talking about, I believe are here on the assessment sheet. We did have one information meeting, which there were numbers presented to the landowners. And to my knowledge, the only numbers that have changed from that meeting to this meeting or to the consideration report were the numbers for Branch C, which Mr. David's property is not involved with. So one of the numbers that he talked about was 51,141. That's the gross assessment to that property. Another number that he pointed out was 20,141. That's the net. So after the allowances are removed in the report from his gross assessment, his net assessment is $20,000. So 50,000 to 20,000. And that brings me to the next point. The value of the pond that is on Mr. Lansbury's property is assessed at $30,000. So we took a value of industrial land and we give allowances to anyone or any properties that were going to use those lands for the construction of the drain. And that pond itself is one of those. So that pond on Mr. Lansbury's property was valued at $30,000 and given allowance in this report. So the next thing is there liabilities for using that pond? It now becomes part of the municipal drain. So the municipal drain is maintained and administered by the municipality. So if there's any liabilities, it would be through the drain itself. I believe that was the questions that were brought up.
Thank you. Councillor Pierce?
Thanks, Madam Chair. For you, just very quickly. So you said the value of the pond is 30,000. Now, how do you come up with that? Is it the number of properties that potentially could drain into it, or is it just as you said, the area of the pond compared to the overall area?
So through the chair, it's the physical area of the pond up to what we call the 100-year design. So everybody within the watershed, the new properties that are being developed, the original properties that are there, had to do stormwater management for the 100-year storm. Right. So they're doing that. And that amount, which the water, as Mr. Lansbury's property said, from north of him will go into that pond first, just by the lay of the land, and it'll fill up to that 100-year mark. And at that 100-year mark, we pick it up in the roadside ditch and take it away. So the size of that 100-year pond, we calculated it and we give him allowances for that based on $100,000 per acre for industrial land.
So if I could, Madam Chair, so let me kind of rephrase that. Regardless if there's one property or 20 properties, that makes no bearing on the cost. It's simply the size of the pond.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay,
Counselor Miller?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through to the consultants. So, looking at the assessment then to Lansborough, you have a benefit of 40,000, outlet 10,000. You add the two together, 50,000. Are you saying the $30,000 value assigned to the stormwater management pond comes off that 50,000? Or is it just 50? Is that already taken off?
So through the chair, the assessment against that property is based on benefit and outlet.
Yeah.
So the benefit is the number again that we've shown in there as benefit to the outlet of the drain, right? And then outlet is the size of that going be downstream. So just like every other property, there's two assessments.
No, I got that. I understand that. Yeah, and you get a total of $50,000. The value or the value you have assigned to the stormwater management pond, the $30,000, does that come off that 50?
Yes.
So
the 50 is the gross assessment. 20 is the net assessment. So the $30,000 is allowance payable to that property comes off the total.
Okay. So because it showed 50 here, but that includes the 30,000 for the stormwater management. Am I correct in that? No.
So through the chair, we always produce what is called a net assessment schedule that shows allowances and in some cases grant. There will be some small grants allowed in this drain because of agricultural lands, but mostly this drain is not an agricultural drain. Okay. We don't put this, we just fold it up and we stick it in the report because the Drainage Tribunal doesn't want us to say that shall be the case because the government won't necessarily always give those grants.
Fair enough.
So
I'm going to ask if we could have a copy, Madam Chair, maybe for our deliberations. Thank you.
Yeah, staff are nodding. Thank you. Councillor Pierce.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Sorry to remind you. So I just want to confirm the value assessed to that pond is not a grant. That is an assessment because it's a water, it's a catch basin, so to speak, correct? It has nothing to do with the grant.
that is correct. It's an allowance. So let's look upon it as the drain is purchasing that pond in order to use it for the whole drain. The property is still owned by Sir David. This property is still owned by David, but for the drain purposes, it's being purchased at $100,000 per hectare for that. I don't believe so because it's not agricultural. Only grants that I'm aware of under the Drainage Act are for agricultural properties. So again, when you get the chance to look at this, it'll show the agricultural properties on here and it'll show the 1/3 grant allowed to those properties, not to industrial, commercial, or roads or any other properties.
Is there further questions from the court? All right, I do have one myself. Hearing how the allowance is calculated, that was $100,000 per acre. And is that a standard within drainage reports, or how did you determine that that's how that would be credited back?
So through the chair, we looked at areas in the area and we talked to a real estate agent and we come up with that number for industrial non-serviced lands within that area. And we use that number.
Thank you. All right, we'll invite Mr. Lansborough back for closing comments.
The value of the land. The land is being taxed at, I believe, around $150,000 an acre, if I'm remembering correctly. I think that the tax value of land, if I'm not mistaken, is generally lower than the actual sale value of the property. I think that anybody in this room would agree that commercial land, especially now developed commercial land, which ours is worth far more than $100,000 an acre. Just for the consideration of our own property, and what is going into it from our own property and what's been paid for, now take in the fact of at least 4 other pieces of property draining into it, it definitely occupies a half acre or more. So if it's 150,000, well, that's more than the $30,000 that we're allowed. If it's, you're valuing it at 70 or 30,000, I don't know how you arrived at 30,000. It basically does occupy an acre. The last meeting I asked if I wanted to develop or build something, what would be my setbacks from that potential water pond now? So yes, the bowl itself is a certain size, but obviously I can't build to the lip of that bowl. They're going to want a certain amount of setback. So that's more land that's taken up in essence by the pond. So I still believe that a fair calculation has not been calculated on the value of our land. And again, since there is no construction on our property and we are part of the solution, again, I'm happy to be part of the solution. I think you gathered that I'm not happy to pay to be part of it. So I really think that these calculations should be revisited. They should be perhaps a little more disclosure. And I think when we do that, I think that you'll find that the property that is being used up, our property, has a lot more value than what's been laid out in this spreadsheet.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we will briefly return to 7.2. The landowners haven't been able to join us. I will just quickly defer to staff. Is the engineer permitted to speak to a written submission, or we just? Okay, yes. Did our engineers have any comments on 7.2? That was the Spearenburg property.
So through the chair, I think there are actually in the written submission for the Spearenburg property, there are five individual comments. Comment number 1 is about the watershed plan, and it's talking about the pieces within the Spearenburg property that have already been severed off. Now, we didn't have that when we put together our plan at the time, so our comments have. The report's been adopted by council. If there are severances, just like in any other municipal drain after it's been adopted, you can go to section 65 of the Drainage Act and you can have those severed properties assessed and removed and changed in the name and ownership. So that can be done and dealt with after the fact. I think the second point, I think they're talking about the watershed size. Again, Mr. Spearenburg has farmed there for several years, and he doesn't believe that the watershed is the way we have shown it. So all I can tell you is that we've developed the watershed based on LiDAR, satellite mapping, and contour mapping, and we believe the watershed is correct. And again, this drain is designed for the flow from a 100-year storm to a 250-year storm. So if Mr. Spearenburg doesn't think the water flows in those directions today under a 5-year storm, 2-year storm, 3-year storm, whatever, I think it may be different if we're talking about a 100-year storm and above, that the waters will flow to this drain and get outlet through this drain. Point number 3, they were talking about, they asked about runoff from Elizabeth Avenue. And I think, do we have the plan up? Elizabeth Avenue is within the village of Burford. It's not within the watershed of our drain, so I can't comment on Elizabeth Avenue. Number 4 is the same issue with the lands on the west side of Bishopsgate Road. Same answer to that. And point number 5. Point number 5 was about the sizing of the design. So the sizing of the design is based on the flow coming off of these properties over the 100-year storm and up to the 250-year storm. And Mr. Spearenburg thinks that that's ridiculous in his design. We were asked to do that. We were asked to size this report, size this drain based on that criteria. So that's the answers.
Thank you. Do any members of the court have questions? Councillor Pierce.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I just want to bear with me here. So what you said there is if there's been pieces that have been already severed off, that can be handled after the fact, I think is what I heard. So the bottom line here is, if I look at their assessment, they've got to come up with $165,000, and then potentially they could get some of that back.
That is correct. Their assessment will go down with the Section 65 changes.
So to me, that's two different things. Their assessment's not, they still have to pay, right? So in essence, their assessment is what you're putting in right here. So it's not going to go down until they've already coughed up $165,000. And that may be fine and dandy for this particular person, may not be fine and dandy for that particular person. So I'm struggling with the fact that, and I appreciate the fact that they can be looked at after, but that's kind of tough on whomever it may be in a situation that has parcels severed off. Sure, I understand if they're severing off parcels, they're getting money for severing them off. I appreciate that, but that to me, it just seems kind of weird that somebody's got to, if it's documented severed off, yet they've still got to come up with the initial assessment, and then after the fact, get it back. Is there interest with that? Like, you know where I'm going here?
I do. Did Robert want to comment on this?
Yeah, we'll call him Mr. Walton.
The issue I have with properties happening separate after the fact or during the process is ultimately municipality and the engineer can go by is what the information you get from impact at the time as to what the properties that exist. So what's happening outside of that, like the registry office and when properties are sold, I was talking to a couple of the owners back here just for when some of them close or whatever. That happens at the registry office when they purchase it and they can, that property can be registered on there through severance and whatever. But it's 6 to 12 months of impact before we get the information on that. So there's no way that they can have a report current. The property, as far as impact is concerned, doesn't exist. Now, there's a process to go through where you eventually put taxes on the property and get going. But I'm trying to call back there and he's saying that the one property closed January, they've got a tax bill on it either. So all we can go is in here. But the Drainage Act is set up under Section 65 to deal with this. So when we're going out to build it, we'll have a process there to subdivide that assessment properly, and then have it subdivided. The gross property is there, we know how much size is, and then with one or two or three properties are after. That's easily done. And there's three different ways that it can happen. The engineer can be appointed to do it, or the owners can agree to it. Just the two ways. The owners can actually agree on what to split up what it is too. But these ones are a little bit more complicated than the owners than it just being acreage being split up, because the industrial property will have all the benefit of whatever to how that would vary between the properties a little different than the acreage. So I hope that helps.
Okay, yeah, it's.
And I used to get this on. I wrote drainage reports, dealt with this all the time. It was the same 30 plus years ago too.
You're aging yourself.
No, 40 years ago I just started.
All right, so with that, we have heard our submitted and our oral appeals, so the court is going to recess to the side room to deliberate. Members of the public, I believe, are welcome to hang around if anyone needs the washroom. It's just through the doors there, and we'll give you a 5-minute heads up when we're ready to reconvene. Thank you. we're going to proceed with our decisions in the order that they were listed on the agenda. So we'll begin with 336 Bishopsgate Road. That's Mr. Wilson, and we are going to be dismissing this appeal as that the court agrees with the engineer's fair and impartial assessment for the benefit and outlet of the drain. Next, we have the written assessment from Don and Karen Spearenberg, 1282, 1284 Colburn West. This appeal is dismissed as the court agrees with the engineer's fair and impartial assessment for the benefit and outlet on the drain. We had the third one. This was Mr. Odd, 3036 Bishopsgate Road. This appeal is dismissed as the court agrees with the engineer's fair and impartial assessment for the benefit and outlet on the drain. With regards to the fourth, B&B Landco 338 Bishopsgate Road, this appeal is dismissed as the court agrees with the engineer's fair and impartial assessment for the benefit and outlet of the drain. We'll recall that the fifth file that was on our agenda is going to be dealt with under a separate section in the Drainage Act because those severances had not proceeded prior to the drainage report, which does take us to our verbal submission today. That's 340 Bishopsgate Road, David Lansborough, Triggers and Bows. So the court finds that the assessment on this property is to be reduced by $15,000, and the reduction is added to the assessment on the property owned by the County of Brant, as the court believes that the municipality will recoup its costs through future assessment. This reduction represents the fair market value per MPAC at $150,000 per acre, whereas the engineer's assessment was $100,000 per acre. So with that, we will declare the court adjourned. Thank you.